As the public sphere becomes increasingly hostile to religious faith, it's encouraging to witness those who remain bold in their faith despite such attacks. A recent example comes from the state of Washington, the city of Seattle, where the Attorney General, Bob Ferguson, has launched an investigation into Seattle Pacific University for requiring faculty and staff to abide by their Christian code of conduct. As a result, the university is being accused of civil rights violations against, you guessed it, LGBTQ plus people. To their credit, the school is not backing down. The university filed a countersuit asking a federal court to stop the Attorney General's interference with a Christian university that is merely seeking to remain true to its faith and mission. And joining me now to discuss this is Lori Windham, Senior Counsel at Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, the organization that filed the countersuit on behalf of SPU. Lori, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thanks so much for having me on. It's great to be here.
We're glad to have you. There's a little background there, but tell us a little bit more. What do we need to know about how this situation developed?
Well, there's been controversy because Seattle Pacific University, as a Christian university, asked that its leadership, its employees, agree with its statement of faith and abide by its lifestyle policies that are rooted in its Christian faith. Because of that, Washington State's Attorney General, the same one who had gone after Arlene's flowers, decided that he was going to open a wide-ranging investigation into the university and ask for information on confidential and private employee matters and also on religious matters. That's something that our Constitution and the First Amendment forbids. And so Seattle Pacific is in federal court now asking that its rights be protected.
Laura, you mentioned there that this investigation is kind of probing the religious beliefs of the university. Do you have an example of the kind of questions that they're asking for, the information that they're looking for?
The university is wanting to know what the religious university's policies are, what all of its employment positions are, how it has applied those policies to employees, and even private contact information for employees, presumably so that the Attorney General can contact them and learn more. This is an attempt to interfere in the decisions and the religious decisions and relationships of a religious university and organization. Yeah. And so this is something that is prohibited by law.
Lori, this brings to mind something that I feel like I've heard about somewhere that referred to as the separation of church and state. And I've heard a lot of my friends on the left talk about this. And ironically, this seems to be an attempt by the state to manage how the church, in this case, a Christian university, operates. Am I misunderstanding this in some way?
That's exactly right. And that's very well said. The Supreme Court has said part of separation of church and state is actually keeping the state out of the affairs of the church and stopping government officials from getting involved in religious disputes. This is something for a religious body to decide what its beliefs are, who's going to lead the group, and how it's going to live that out. Government officials are not entitled to interfere in those decisions.
You mentioned Attorney General Bob Ferguson, who is a little notorious in religious freedom circles because he, again, initiated the initial legal action against Baronelle Stutzman. You mentioned she's was the owner at the time of Arlene's Flowers, and spent nearly a decade in court defending her right not to decorate for a same-sex wedding. So this is the same Attorney General who now seems to be going out of his way to try to micromanage how a Christian university is operating. On what basis does he think he, as the Attorney General, has the right to do this?
Well, that's a great question. You ought to ask him. He has argued in his letter announcing an investigation, argued that under Washington law, Seattle Pacific University doesn't have the right to be able to ask its employees to affirm its faith commitments and abide by its conduct expectations. Those are rights that are protected by state and federal law. Those are rights that are protected by our Constitution. And yet the Attorney General is the one who began this by opening an investigation and threatening further legal action against the university simply for living out its faith.
Lori, how do you expect this to be resolved? Because at first glance, this just seems like an obvious overstep, an obvious abuse of power, especially given very recent precedent at the Supreme Court telling governments you can't harass people because you don't like their beliefs. What's your expectation for this case?
Well, you're exactly right. The Supreme Court has been clear that religious schools have the right to make these decisions for themselves. I would hope that the Attorney General would recognize that this is an unlawful investigation and would back off from that. But we're going to see in a couple of weeks what his answer to the lawsuit will be. And if he's going to continue to fight this, if he's going to continue to try and go after the university, and he's indicated in some of his statements that he will, then I believe ultimately the courts are going to rule in favor of Seattle Pacific and its right to follow its mission, hire those who share its faith and mission, and protect its First Amendment rights.
It really is sad that we're even having these conversations, but I think this case is a great illustration of how the blue state, red state divide in America is becoming so clear, where you have, in certain circumstances, governments trying to manage religious institutions, micromanage religious institutions in this way. But Lori Windham, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for all the work you at the Becket Fund do on behalf of religious liberty.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be part of the work.